We're gonna dive right into it. I'm gonna go over the most important things. I'm gonna let you know what is the big winners, what is the big losers in this new patch, and you're gonna lose it. By the way, enchanters are dead. Alrighty, let's jump right into it. First up, we got a little teaser for the new filter system. Basically, we will be able to filter our deck right here by affinities and by a lot of other different things, which is kind of a really nice feature to have. But let's dive into the really important thing. We're gonna start with the Illuvials. The Anteater line has been nerfed. Basically, their dodge chance has been nerfed down because Spore was kind of unkillable if you didn't bring Clumsy or True Sight augments. Next up, we got the Scarabog line, the Beetle line. Basically, the Beetle stage number 1, Scarabog, is gonna get nerfed. Instead of a 3-second stun, we only have a 1-second stun. Then on the Goliath, we have a 2-second stun. And on the Titanor, we have the same 3 seconds duration. The mana, the energy cost of all 3 of them has been lowered, so they're gonna cast more frequently. And they have a new effect. So once they cast their ability, for the stage 3, for example, for 4 seconds after casting their ability, they're gonna have a damage reduction of 45%. So this is a huge buff to the Beetle line, and it is well needed, and we're gonna see more Titanor on the ladder. Next up, we got the Turtle line. All the physical and energy resistances have been increased. I like to see this a lot because, for example, Arcalion right here was kind of a squishy target, which shouldn't be that squishy. Next up, we got that Dodo line. Kuka and Kukulu stay the same, but Kukurov has a lower attack range, which is nice to see because it kind of felt like a ranged unit. Next up, we got the Elk line. Basically, the heal has been reduced for the stage 3, but the Omega power has been buffed. For stage 1, we have the reverse happening. Its Omega power is lower, but its heal is bigger. And the biggest change is probably the cast time right here has been reduced on stage 2 and 3 to cast a little bit faster. Really good to see because Adorius was really easy to be silenced out of the cast or something. Some shenanigans happening in that 3 seconds of cast time, so nice to see 2.5 seconds right there. The Umber line right here has been reworked a little bit, so the Omega power does not scale anymore with the attack damage. Now the flat damage will scale with Omega power, and then the attack damage will be added to it. Good to see balancing out the Umber line a little bit. Scorpion line has a huge update, and I'm so happy about this because the energy cost has been doubled, so it won't cast that frequently anymore, and it will feel more like a berserker, like it's supposed to be. Also, all the survivability stats have been lowered. The max health, the physical and energy resistance, also the flat damage, but it will make a little bit more max health % damage. Next up, we got the Pangolin line. Basically, very similar to the Umber line, where the attack damage cannot longer scale with Omega power. It will only scale with flat damage, and then the attack damage is added to it. And to counter this a little bit, the flat damage has been increased a lot, almost by double. Next up, the Shrimp line. So far we had a static 5-second duration debuff on its cast, reducing the energy resistance, but now this debuff will only happen while the target is affected by the laser, and also the debuff has been reworked a little bit, where stage 1 gives less debuff, and the Dual F, the stage 3, gives a little bit more debuff. Next up, the Pterodactyl line has its Omega radius reduced on all 3 stages. So basically, before you were able to hit almost the entire board of the enemy with your Ramfire, and now it will matter a little bit more how you position your Ramfire. Then we got the Shubil line, which has been buffed on stage 2 and stage 3, and the stage 1 Fern has been nerfed. We're gonna have longer attack speed, buff and debuffs, and also a longer knock-up duration. Then we got the Star-Nosed Mole line, which has overall been nerfed, and the charm duration is gonna be lower, and the cast duration is gonna be a little bit higher, also helping with their Omega, charm, and untargetable duration synchronizing a little bit better. Then the Taipan line, we got a nerf on Fury and Furiox, reducing their splash radius and also their attack speed buff, which is one of the first things that will nerf the Arcanite Bloom as we know it, because we usually play Furiox in that. Next up, we got the snail line. The snails did not see much love lately, so we decided to nerf TNT even more. Basically, the damage is getting reduced a little bit and the survivability is getting increased, and this should be more in line how C4s actually should work. It should be a tanky caster, but not one-shotting everything, and we will see how that works out. Next up, the squid line. The cast times of the stage 1 and stage 2 have been increased, and the cast time of the Ophisto, the stage 3, has been reduced. Really nice change here, as 2.4 seconds for the cast time for Ophisto was a little bit too long. Next up, huge changes to the water buffalo line. Basically everything in red numbers right here, everything has been reduced. What's most notable is the thorns damage has been reduced by more than half. Also, the thorns duration, the radius of the taunt and the attack range, and also the max health buff is lower and the duration is also lower. Really good to see, as this has just been dominating all of the meta. All decks basically played those 3 units. Then we got the Komodo Dragon line, and its blind duration is better on higher stages. Next up, the Terra Bird line. Also, only red numbers right here. We have a lower attack range, which will probably end up in Phosphorus not being able to attack over allied unit anymore, and it has to actually run into melee range to actually attack its target. Also, its Omega width has been lowered, so it will be harder to hit multiple targets with your Omega. Your energy costs are higher and the damage is lower of that Omega, so overall big nerfs coming in for the Phosphorus line. Let's see if Arcanite is still playable after this one. Next up, we got the Monkey Fighter line, and the most notable changes are the Omega radius is gonna get reduced, which is really nice to see, as it was just able to hit so many units with its splash damage. Also, the attack damage is gonna get reduced. Next up, the Sloth line changes to the stage 1 and 2, reducing the knock-up duration. Really good to see, as this guy has just been perma-stunning my backline. Here comes one of the probably most anticipated buffs for an Illuvial. It's for the Polar Bear line, and we're getting huge buffs on this one, as we are now not only stealing physical attack damage but also energy attack damage. The steal duration is getting higher on stage 2 and 3, and the missing health percent heal is getting a huge buff. Double on stage 1, triple on stage 2, and 4 times stronger on the stage 3. So we will see a lot of Jotun. We're coming to the behemoth buffs in a minute. Next up, let's talk about the affinities. Frost is getting a huge buff, with the activation time being lower, the frost radius being higher, and also the blind radius being higher. Bloom is getting a huge nerf, so I think Arcanite will just be out of the meta for now. The health regen buff is being removed from the Bloom's kit, and now it will only increase every 8 seconds the max health and the Omega power, and both of those values are getting nerfed a lot. Dust is getting a beautiful rework, where the effect of Dust is now applied throughout the Omega. For example, if Gyro rolls around, he applies his blind and Omega power debuff to all units hit in his path. And for example, a Ranger with Dust will apply the blind and Omega debuff in a medium area where it starts casting the Omega, and also where it lands with its Omega. To counter that a little bit, the Omega power debuff has been nerfed a little bit. Then we come up to the Spore, where also the heal on dodge has been reduced, which is really nice to see, as Spore was just so strong if you didn't bring the counter augments for it. Next up, we got the Tsunamis, and the energy you get refunded after each cast has been nerfed. For example, if you have 4 Tsunamis on the board instead of 75%, you only get 55% mana back. Really good to start nerfing the enchanters, but there's more to come later on. Next up, we got the Mud, and its energy gain on hit has been reduced quite a lot. For example, for 4 Mud, you're gonna get only 4 energy instead of 7. Next up, we got a nerf to the Toxic. We have the poison radius being lowered and the activation time being increased by 1 second. Wildfire overall gets really nice buffs, and this is nice to see, as Wildfire has been underperforming on the ladder quite a lot. I'm really surprised by the Shock buff, because now the energy resist debuff is gonna be even higher, but just by a little bit. For example, here we have 7 to 8 on 4 Shock Illuvials. Next up, we're coming to the Fighters. They get an overall nerf on 7 Fighters. The Fighters get less attack speed, and on 5 and 7 fighters the allies get less attack speed. Empaths receive an overall buff, increasing the shields, increasing the healing efficiency, increasing the ally shield and the allies healing efficiency, except for 7 empaths, the empath shield is being lowered and the allies shield is also being lowered. Next up, bulwarks receive an overall nerf, lowering all the resistances that the bulwarks gain and also that the allies gain. Next up, Scion, also overall nerf, reducing all the Omega power that the Scion units and the allies gain. Same goes with Enchanters. We have the pure damage radius is being reduced, as well as the shield that your team is receiving. Next up, Mystic units, the shield also being nerfed by quite a lot, from 450 down to 400 if you have 4 Mystic units on the board. Then we have the Invokers, the stacking Omega power is being reduced also by quite a lot, from 27 down to 19 with 4 Invokers. Also the Templars receiving quite a big debuff, with the resistance debuff and buff going from 5 to 4 on 2, 7 to 5 on 3, and 9 down to 6 on 4 Templars on the field. And this is probably to counter the Blaze Knight buffs and also Wildfire buffs. We had to nerf something else in this kit, which is the Templars. And there it is, the much anticipated Behemoth buff. We have a new buff, which is Cleanse. So every 4th attack, the Behemoth units deal increased damage and they stun their target, and now they also cleanse themselves. Cleanse doesn't remove buffs and debuffs, it just removes status effects like stun and so on. They also gonna do increased max health damage as physical damage on every 4th hit. And this was already really huge, and now we're going up a little bit. For example, if you have 3 behemoths on the field, from 23% we're going up to 25%, and behemoths are just gonna be wrecking through the enemy team. I can't wait to try this out. By the way, most likely we're gonna get this patch next week. The earliest we can get it will be this Friday, as confirmed by Nick. They're trying to push it out for this Friday, but to be realistic, I'm just gonna hope for mid next week, and that's gonna be alright. Next up, we got the Vanguards, which receive a nice rework. So now they're gonna shield on crit. So basically on crit, they're gonna gain a shield for 5 seconds, and they still gonna enrage on takedown, taking less damage and taunting enemies for 2 seconds in a medium area. Then we have a huge rework to augments. They are introducing the augment limitation feature, meaning that only 1 augment per line can be added to a team via team builder, meaning you can only bring 1 Byrogenic Suppressor, not 3 of them. This is gonna be super interesting, and it's gonna change the whole game. Also, there's a lot of changes to augments that we're gonna go over in a second. And also for the legendary augment round, we have a selection algorithm. So basically the bidding phase will always display legendaries as follows. First you get a synergy augment, then you get 2 legendary ability augments, and then another random augment, which is either synergy or legendary ability. And those synergy augments will be tailored to your or the enemy team. So basically the synergy augment is based on what the synergy players have in the team. If you or the enemy has a shock, then a shock synergy augment can come up. If nobody has a shock synergy augment, there will be no synergies like this coming up, which is gonna be super nice to always kind of have important augments in the legendary augment bidding phase. This is random, so it doesn't guarantee one of your synergies in one round and one of your enemy's synergies in the next round. It's gonna be random which of your teams will get the synergy. It's gonna be random which of your team's synergies will come up. Also, there will be no duplicate legendary augments anymore. For example, if Final Abounding was shown during bidding phase round 1, it's removed from the pool and cannot show up in bidding phase number 2. Next up, we got the augments. First up, Charge Capacitor. So basically everything is getting nerfed right here. We're gonna get less energy and less shield. Charge Capacitor right here is this one that you usually put on your Ramfire so it instant casts its ability. Next up, we got the Razor Assimilator, and there is no reworks to this. We just got nerfs on both of the options, either physical attack damage or energy attack damage on assist. And yeah, it's gonna get a quite severe nerf, going down 5 points of all stages from 20 to 15 and so on. Next up, we got the Quantum Nullifier right here, and it has been buffed on stage 1 but nerfed on stage 2 and stage 3. The effects stay the same and the bug still has not been resolved, so it's still not working as intended and doesn't give as much resistance debuff as it should give. This is a deeper problem in the core mechanics of the game, and it's gonna be resolved in a later patch. Next up, we got the Quantum Reservoir, which has its effect reworked. So now the flat energy that it gave will be energy cost percentage as energy. So instead of getting flat 20 energy back on stage 3, you're gonna get 12% of your energy back, which is really nice to see because now we can use it on more Illuvials. The energy cost percentage as a shield is gonna get nerfed, which is really nice to see because Axodon, for example, was just getting huge shields off of that. Next up, we got the very popular Hyperkinetic Stimulator. This is giving you Omega power or attack speed, and basically we're gonna get a nerf across the board for stage 2 and stage 3. Stage 1 stays the same. Next up, we got the Neogenic Recombinator. This one right here, it gets a nerf on stage 3 for both bonuses. We get a nerf on stage 2, giving a little bit max health for the holder, and we get a buff on the team max health bonus for stage 1. Next up, we got the Siphon Matrix, which either reduces the energy or the attack speed of the enemies. It's gonna trigger a little bit earlier now, so not after 4 seconds, but after 3 seconds after combat start. And we have a nerf across the board, taking away less energy and taking away less attack speed. Next up is the Graviton Piercer, and this has been a little bit reworked. It's not gonna trigger on battle start anymore, but it's gonna trigger every 6 attacks. So every 6 attacks, you're gonna get physical and energy resistance penetration, or every 6 attacks, you're gonna get True Sight. You're gonna always have that after 6 attacks, and a stacking attack speed bonus buff. Then we have the Vitality Veil right here, and we're gonna have nerfs across the board. The health regen duration is gonna get nerfed, and the energy duration is also gonna get nerfed from the bonus effect number 1, and also the untargetable duration of bonus 2 is gonna get reduced on all stages. Next up is the Hyper Endurance Matrix, and we're gonna get a little bit of a rework on its first bonus. So instead of giving max health to the holder, it's gonna give you a full team physical and energy resistance. And then we have a big nerf on the second available bonus, where, for example, for stage 3, instead of 80 flat resistances, we're gonna only get 48 anymore. Next up, we got the Photon Ripper, which is been nerfed across all stages for both bonuses. It gives crit chance or pure attack damage, and huge nerf again. Stage 3, instead of 48 pure damage, you're only gonna do 25 pure damage, and this was well needed as this augment was almost in all decks that had something to do with auto attacks. Then we have the Redemption Core, which is just gonna trigger now at 40% instead of 60%. Next up, we got the Synergetic Field, and its trigger is being reworked. So instead of buffing your whole team, your teammates within 25 hexes, holder included, will get the buff, and the radius is gonna be 25. Next up, we got the Parasitic Link, and this is a really interesting change because instead of buffing your 2 closest allies, you're only gonna buff your 1 closest ally now. And to accommodate this, we're gonna go up with the numbers. For example, for stage 3, instead of 16%, it's gonna be 20% now. And for the bonus effect number 1, where you just give the holder Omnivamp, it's gonna get reduced by 5% on all stages. Next up, the Maladaptive Resonator. And we are just lowering the clumsy duration and the healing debuff from 6 seconds to 4 seconds. Huge change coming in here for the Reactive Deflector. Instead of providing invulnerable for your units, now we have take less damage. So for example, for stage 1, instead of being invulnerable for 3 seconds, we're gonna take less damage, 40% less damage for 3 seconds. And then on stage 3, it's 60% less damage for 5 seconds. So still similar approach to the augment, but not as OP anymore. And the Thorns value has been lowered across the board. Next up, a crowd's favorite Biogenic Suppressor. You could find this in every single deck 3 times, but now we're only gonna get 1 of them in each deck maximum. And it has been lowered across the board. The healing reduction has been lowered for stage 2 and stage 3, and the energy reduction has been lowered for all 3 stages by quite a bit. Next up, we got the Omnigenic Modulator. This used to gain crit amp or Omega power once you cast your Omega. This has been reworked to now give attack damage percentage or Omega power on every Omega, which will open a lot of new strategies, especially for those fighters, for those rogues, and all of that stuff. Next up, we got the temporal safeguard, and this is gonna get a little rework in the trigger. Instead of triggering on every Omega, it's gonna trigger on every second Omega. Also a significant debuff, a significant nerf to the Arcanites. We're gonna not get the cleanse anymore on stage 1, and we're gonna increase the immune duration on stage 1 by double, reduce the immune duration a little bit on stage 2, and keep it the same for stage 3. For the second bonus, the damage reduction on each Omega cast, which is going to be now on every second Omega cast, we're going to buff this by 5% for stage 1 and stage 2. Next up, we got the Fusion Igniter, and we're going to get a buff on stage 1 and a nerf on stage 2 and stage 3. Next up, we got the Photonic Unity, which gets a huge nerf. So from the bonus number 1, the energy gain is removed, and from the bonus number 2, the crit chance is being removed. Next up, the Nano Sequencer. The trigger is gonna happen only every 5 seconds instead of every 4 seconds, and the values that you get every 5 seconds is gonna be reduced a lot. Nice to see this, because this was just too strong. If the fight was going to 40 seconds, this unit was unkillable. Next up, we got the Survival Protocol, and Indomitable is gone. So it's gonna trigger instead of 10% at 25% health, and instead of Indomitable, you will take less percentage damage and you will cleanse. Here you can see all the stats to those reworks, and also the second effect has been reworked where it doesn't give a shield anymore, but you gain extra percentage damage and you will cleanse as well. This could be huge on a target like Jotun, for example. Last up, we got the Fortification Catalyst, and there is a little rework where it used to apply only on allies, but now it applies on teammates, which means also the holder is included, and the overall stats have been lowered a little bit. Now we have a huge section about all the weapons. So basically what you gotta know, here we got the gloves, the Scion weapon, and they all have been nerfed in the damage and also in the stacking Omega power right here, and basically red numbers across the line. If we look at the 70 cost glove right here, 70 cost Scion weapon, instead of 700 damage, we're only gonna do 525. Instead of 26 Omega power stacking every cast, we're only gonna get 19 Omega power stacking every cast. So that's a 25% reduction, which is huge, and this should solve the enchanter problem. Next up, we got the swords with the fighters, which just have a little tiny bit of damage increase, and also they have a little bit more max health. We can see at the highest cost, instead of 102 damage, we now do 109 damage, and instead of 375 health, we get 440. Little buff, nice to see, as this has been underused a lot. Last up here, we have the water weapons, who have all been nerfed a lot. So the starting energy and the max energy for water weapons was reduced by 40%. We can see it right here. For example, the gauntlet 70 cost, instead of 82 starting energy, we now have 73 starting energy. And instead of casting at 118 energy, we're gonna cast at 127. So basically all the water weapons are gonna cast less and are getting nerfed. That's it with all the weapons. Now we have the bug fixes as the last points. Some really important bug fixes. We have, for example, the mastery point issues that led to game desynchronizations, on-screen errors, and incorrect display of mastery points has been fixed. They also resolved the bug where there was an issue when players encountered an empty session due to their opponent cancelling the queue. The bug has been fixed where in the bidding phase you couldn't do anything. Squid Omega is not gonna target fainted units anymore. More overall connectivity during Alt-Tab when you tapped out, network disconnections or delays. There is not gonna be any more incorrect rating displays after surrendering a match. And there you have it, guys. This is by far the best, most anticipated patch that we have seen ever, and it's gonna turn the whole game around. I really like that all the OP stuff, all the overpowered units and things in the game have been addressed, have been nerfed, and also all the underpowered things like Behemoth, like Blaze Knight, and so on have been buffed. So it's gonna be really interesting to see which of the old meta is still playable, what we're gonna have in the new meta, and the gameplay is gonna change so much as well by limiting our augment choices, so we can only bring one stage augment for each of the augments. Also the legendary augment phase is gonna be so much more interesting, with always offering valuable synergy augments in every round. And yeah, I don't know what to say. We're gonna get it maybe the earliest on Friday, probably next week. And yeah, if you like this content, I'm sweating right here. I'm just speedrunning this thing. Click the link down in the description below. Register for the game. Download the game. You're gonna love it. If you already have it, just create a second account. You're gonna love climbing on a second account in the arena in the new patch, because then you're just gonna have new promotional games. Gonna gain so much more rating. If you're able to win a lot of games, you're gonna get high up in those leaderboards. And that's where I wanna see you. And I'll see you there. Have a good one. Thanks for tuning in. In the next one, we're gonna talk probably about Illuvium. Peace out.